what's going on, everybody? I'm Sam. I am a pastor. I'm a student of the Bible. If you want to read my writings, I write on samburke.org. Just click on posts and you can scroll down and see all the stuff I write there. My training involves biblical studies, theology, biblical languages. I get a question every once in a while. I was a youth pastor for a long time, and so I got this question a lot from middle school and high school students. But you get it every once in a while, and I'm starting to see it pop up on YouTube here lately. And it's the question of, is a Mormon a real Christian? I get that a lot. And so I usually don't answer that straight away. I'm not in the business of saying you're a real Christian, you're not a real Christian. What I usually do is what I want to do in this video here is I point people back to the history of the church, because in church history, the church actually had to tackle this question: what does it mean to be a real Christian? Where can you go? Like, if you have like a baseball field that you're playing called Christianity, how do you know if you are playing on the field or if you have gone, out of bounds, kind of a deal? And so there's an easy way to kind of check this and to know. And so it goes back into church history, like I said. So for the first 300 years or so of church history, the church did not have any official, doctrinal position paper, that kind of stuff. There was not like, this is the doctrine of the church, follow this. In fact, there wasn't even what we would call just regular Christianity. This is what it is. In fact, that we would be better saying a Christianity of the past is a misnomer. It'd probably be better saying there were multiple kinds of Christianities all over the place, because the bishops really determined that in their local areas. There was not a consensus place over like, hey, this is the doctrine. They had the Didache, which was kind of like a practice manual, kind of for like what the church practiced when it relates to baptism and that kind of stuff. But they did not have like a doctrinal position that this is what a real Christian believes. And so what you had bishops who had their own versions of canon, different writings that they would collect and like to teach. And they started having their own ideas even about, who Jesus was, the Holy Spirit, what that's all about, all these kind of things. And so you started seeing these little doctrinal blips pop up over in the church. Well, in the late 2nd, 3rd century, the apologists start going after Gnosticism, that kind of stuff, but it keeps popping back up again. And finally, this guy named Arius becomes the spokesperson of this theology within the church that starts gaining ground in the church. And this Arian theology basically said that Jesus was not co-eternal with the Father. There were already this discussion was going on of who is Jesus? What does it mean that Jesus is divine? Are Jesus and God the Father of the same substance? Are they not? Like they're trying to wrestle through this. And Arius and his teachings start taking people away from that idea and saying, no, Jesus is a created being. And he is more or less like a demigod, like a lower being. And so he's not co-eternal with the Father. He was created by the Father. He's not, all this stuff. And so there began, and this started gaining popularity, and there began this problem, this divide within the church. Well, this is during the time of the reign of Constantine, and Constantine is said to have converted. And for all intents and purposes, as I read church history, this is kind of my take on, and I think a lot of others' takes on Constantine, what happened, why the Council of Nicaea happened. If you want to read more about that, I've talked about this book before, The Story of Christianity by Justo Gonzalez. There's another book that I referenced before. Go back and you can check that out. I forget what it's called. I don't have it on me, or it's in my office, but both of them write from the same kind of perspective, that what was really kind of going on with Constantine is Constantine cared more about the division of his empire. That he was watching, just a few years earlier, he had made it illegal to persecute Christians. And now this it's not a complete schism, but this divide over who Jesus is and the divinity of Jesus was becoming apparent in his kingdom amongst the churches. And so Constantine says we need to figure this out. And so he gathers together all of the bishops at Nicaea, and he says to them, I don't want my kingdom divided, figure this out. And that's exactly what they do. And I think it's fascinating that the bishops all gather together to discuss what Arius is teaching, and yet Arius isn't invited to this council because he's not a bishop. And so the bishops end up determining that what Arius is teaching about Jesus being a created being, a lower version of God, whatever, is heretical. It's heresy. They say, no, Jesus is consubstantial with the Father, meaning he is of the same substance, okay? And there's another fancy Greek word here. I'm not going to bore you with all that. But basically, that's what they determined, that Jesus, his divinity, means that he is of the same substance. Not the same person as God the Father. They are separate and different, but of the same substance, which would lead later on to the doctrine of the Trinity and how they would say, okay, well, Jesus is God. He's of the same substance as the Father, but he's not the Father. He's of the same substance as the Spirit, but not the Spirit, and so on and so forth, all that stuff. And at that point, Nicaea declares through these bishops at Nicaea declare through a creed that they create that this is like the tent pole that we're putting in the ground of Christianity. And they plant their flag for the very first time to say this is what it means to be an Orthodox Christian, to be a real Christian. Beyond this, if it goes against what this creed says, then that is heresy. That's heterodox Christianity. That's not Orthodox Christianity. And so, and they pick very few things, very specific things. And for the first time in the church's history, we have a creed now that we agree to, that we affirm, to say, yes, I affirm these things, therefore I am an Orthodox Christian. And that was one that most of the church, outside of these ones who have been following this Arian way of viewing things, which, by the way, shows up over and over and over again. Just because Nicaea happened and just because the creed happened didn't mean it did away with this. It kept popping back up. But it's the very first time where they put a stake in the ground and they say, this is Orthodox Christianity. This is what you must believe in order to be a Christian. And from that moment on, 325 CE on, we have this creed that everybody says this is what we agree on and believe about. And so I think if we're going to talk about, okay, who's a real Christian, who's not a real Christian, 325, the Nicene Creed, that is the benchmark for what Christianity is. That if you affirm those things in the Nicene Creed, then you would call yourself an Orthodox Christian. And we need to use that creed because a lot of people nowadays that like to throw around the word heresy, they like to call people heretics who would affirm the Nicene Creed. And so I think we need to be careful, number one, of throwing the word heresy around and calling people heretics, because that's how you get into these weird situations where you're exiling people, where you're killing people. You know, in the Protestant Reformation, how people over how they baptized were killing people. It's ridiculous. Some of the stuff that people have done for the name of quote unquote heresy, when all of them would affirm the Nicene Creed. So the 325, the Nicene Creed, that's the first time that we have a stake in the ground saying this is Orthodox Christianity. So I would ask somebody if they would say, is this thing really Christian or not? I would say, well, do they affirm the Nicene Creed? Because if you affirm the Nicene Creed, then you can call yourself Orthodox Christian. And so that's the way I answer that question. And I would hope that's the way that anyone who would call themselves a Christian would answer that question. They'd go back in church history and go, you know what? This is what it means to be a Christian. This is what the church decided in 325. This is what they affirmed, and this is what it means to be a Christian. All right. So that's how I would answer that question. I think that's how a lot of people would answer that question. And nowadays, though, there are some people who want to say, no, it's my version of this, it's my version of that. If we go back to the creed, we can say, hey, it's not my version, not your version. It's the version that the church decided on in 325 based upon the faith that was handed down from generation to generation to generation. And as they saw people walking away from that generational faith, they said, no, we're going to call that a foul. We're going to call that out of bounds. And we're going to put a stake in the ground and say, this is Orthodox Christianity. All right, hopefully that was helpful. And if you have some of those questions, maybe this would be one of those good things to go look over the Nicene Creed and go, what does it actually say about what it means to be a Christian? All right, have a great day. Like, subscribe, write some comments, and I'll see you in the next one.